Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Welcome to episode 5 of the podcast Encounters with King's College Chapel. My guest on this occasion is not someone you will have heard of before, I suspect. My guest is called Eva Lemmy, and until last summer she was a student here at King's, and I interviewed her just a couple of days before she graduated. We have many students here, of course, and so many of them would really be great candidates to have a conversation in the chapel with. I asked Eva because her relationship with the chapel is really singular and special, because during her last year, Eva directed a production of Macbeth in the chapel. I talked to her about that, the experience of doing it, and all aspects of what it meant to take that particular play into the chapel and how they interpreted it and used the space to bring really interesting aspects of the play to light. But we started outside the chapel, as all the other podcasts have done. We started this one in King's Parade, and it was really high summer. It was very busy, and it was quite exciting and noisy, but bear with us at the excited beginning of this podcast. It does calm down as it goes along. Now, we're in the front court here, and in front of us is the grass. And you know what? You probably don't do this every day, but we're going to walk across the grass in that direction. Is that okay?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
It's always nice to be on the grass when other people are having to take the long way around. So
Bit of privilege. You don't mind that?
It's nice to feel special at King's.
So the screen behind us, this is, which we're just dividing the college from King's Parade. That's a man called William Wilkins is responsible for that. He's also responsible for the National Gallery in London. And the big white building over there, that was constructed in 1724, a man called James Gibbs responsible for that. Also responsible for St Martin in the Fields, the church in London. So this is like a little bit of Trafalgar Square, the corner of Trafalgar Square really, what we have here. Important bit of true truth to overcome some false truth. Nothing to do with the man who built the White House, as almost every other tour guide will tell you. Yeah, exactly. So James Gibbs was that building. But these amazing buildings, like the centre of London, don't get talked about nearly as much as this amazing Gothic building here, which we're about to enter. This is King's College Chapel, and we're standing just under it. Eva, what do you make of that edifice as you look at it now?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I've been at King's for 3 years now, and you still don't get used to it. Every time I sit on King's Parade and have a coffee, you look at it and you think, wow, it's stunning.
It is stunning, isn't it? I mean, it's as we're looking up, it's like looking up on a cliff. And actually, sometimes you have peregrine falcons. They don't nest here, but they roost on here. And sometimes you see them swooping down. And sad to say for any vegetarians, just taking a pigeon out and eating it in front of us. But that's enough of that sort of talk, probably. Shall we go inside?
Yeah. Yeah, I think every time you look at the chapel as well, you notice something different, whether it's another animal or a face. I mean, looking right up to the roof, looking at the faces in the middle, they're different going along.
There's some really grotesque images up there, aren't they?
I've really noticed those before.
No, I mean, they almost look like a Chinese dragon or something.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one of those in the college archives, and people didn't believe. When we were looking at it the other day, no one believed it was from the chapel. But as we go through the entrance of the chapel, you see all this royal heraldry here.
Yeah.
Much more of that when we go inside.
It's a good reminder to look up when you're around these buildings.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
So here we are within the chapel, the back of the antechapel, and already 3 different worlds: King's Parade, the front court, and here. What do you think in here?
I just love being in the chapel. I mean, as you said, it's a hot day today, and you come in here and you can feel the air cool, and it's quieter, it's peaceful. It's just such a, I don't know, it's that there is a feeling when you walk through those doors that you're just aware that it's like this calm space.
I mean, I've been in here hundreds of times, and sometimes with my head down, charging to get in before the next service or whatever. But as I came in just now, I felt it as well. The air is different, the light is different. It's just beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like when you're in like a park and you walk into like the shade of a tree. It's like coming out of like the hustle and bustle of King's and Cambridge into like this shaded building.
So speaking of trees, what do you think of the fan vaulting as it arches above us? Because one of the fantasies I've had about that is it is like a bit of a grove. Yeah, like trees over you.
Yeah, like a treetop canopy. I mean, it's just incredible. I don't understand the architecture and how they built it, but it's just amazing. I could stare at it all day long and still not feel like I could figure out how they achieved that.
No, and there's a famous story of Sir Christopher Wren coming in here and admiring it and saying, OK, I think I could do that if you could tell me where to start, where to put the first stone. I was talking to an engineer about it the other day, and he was saying all these arches are done on a wooden structure underneath to hold them in place, and it's the placing of the central bosses which is the key thing. They go into place, and then all the forces go onto that. And imagine that moment when that's put into place. And he said the whole thing would shift a few inches at that point. Imagine the jeopardy and the experience and the worries of people. But it is astonishing to see these walls so vertical and those huge expanses of glass.
Yeah, they're just gorgeous, the way that they pull the light inwards. And I don't know, I've been in this chapel so many times and I still haven't had time to look at all the different windows and all the features. And
well, I can tell you how the system works, if you like. So it sort of starts in this corner here. So I'm pointing to the northeast corner, and actually we'll go a few bays along because it's easier to read these windows here. And we quickly get to this one, which is the Virgin Mary being visited by the Archangel Gabriel. And we go to the next one, and it's the birth of Jesus. You don't need much imagination to realize that what's going to happen as you continue up that side of the chapel. It's going to be the story of Jesus' early life, and then it's going to be his passion and trial further up. But you do need a bit of imagination to figure out what's going on higher up. And these are all images in the top windows, which are from the Old Testament, which are understood in medieval theology to prefigure or to be types of the story below. So above Mary and the angel, Mary being told that she's going to have the Son of God as her child. And you can see the little image of the Spirit above Mary, the bird, the dove there.
Yeah.
The window above that's Adam and Eve in the garden, or precisely, you can see Eve there holding the apple on the left and the snake wrapped around a tree tempting her. So exactly the opposite story. Here's a woman being tempted by the devil. Here's a woman being greeted by God's messenger. The idea that they're kind of related to each other, but opposite. And all the way along there are different windows. As I say, giving some sense that what's on the lower window is prefigured or preordained.
Okay.
So get towards the front of the antechapel. And the big feature here is, as you know, this screen.
Yeah.
The screen comes from much the same time as the windows, not the same time as the stonework. And it's from the time, that is the time of Henry VIII. More specifically than that, this is the time when Henry VIII was married to Anne Boleyn. And we know this because in the woodwork, there are not only the initials HR, but RA. RA being Queen Anne, HR, King Henry. And I want to show you something I haven't shown you before, actually, Eva. If you come through the arch with me.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do now is we're going to go past a rope, and then we're going to go into the Vice Provost's store. Ooh. Hope he's okay with this. And if you follow me up here, there's some more of this royal initials, HR here.
Yeah.
and RA there.
Wow.
But if we go back here, if you look really, really closely, you can see this.
Oh, wow.
This is H and A entwined together. Really like two lovers carving their initials on a tree or on a bus shelter or something like that.
Wow.
It's so small and yet so significant.
Yeah.
And it allows us to date this screen to, you could say, pretty much precisely 1534. Not only the time when they got married, but also, and all connected with that, the time when Henry declared himself and became the supreme governor of the Church of England. And so that was a moment of triumph and change for this country and its religion. And it's amazing to me to think that the chapel was built before the Reformation, but in the middle of it is this huge statement of the beginning of the king's sovereignty over what we now call the Anglican Church. But we've stopped here in front of the screen on the ante-chapel side, because in your life story and your story of being a student at King's, this particular space has got great significance. Why is this space so special for you?
I was lucky enough that in March of this year, I was able to direct a production of Macbeth, standing right here on these marble steps. We did 3 nights at the end of March, and there's this photo we have taken through the organ screen from one of our rehearsals, which has got the cast and the production team. And it's quite dark. We've got some candles alight, and it's looking up into that big stained glass window up there. And it's just like this massive expanse of space filled with these King students, right on the anticipation, knowing we're about to go into the production week. And it's just, it makes me so excited still to stand here and think about what we did. And
I think you're right to be excited. It was a remarkably good production, if I may say so. Well done. It's not every day we have dramatic performances in here.
No.
And of course, one of the things you had to do to make it happen was to persuade me that it was a good idea.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think you know now that wasn't necessarily an easy task.
No. So myself and the producer, Dan, we approached you back in November time with an email saying, we'd love to talk to you about an idea. Didn't say a whole lot in the email, but then we saw you at brunch at the weekend and came over to your table and said, can we speak to you? We've got this idea. I don't know if you saw our email. And you said, please sit down. And we...
Yeah, of course, you had to say you don't know if I saw your email because you hadn't yet had a reply. So I'm embarrassed to say.
Thinking about we'll come over, we'll introduce ourselves, make our case. And we made our case at brunch. And I think to somewhat of our surprise, you didn't immediately shut us down. You were quite open to hearing more and encouraging us to think more about what it would mean and what we needed to consider and what we should plan. And it led into more and more conversations. And I think, as well as giving us the chance to do this, we thank you a lot for really encouraging us to think through every aspect of it. Because I know there was some, it wasn't an easy decision for you either.
No, I did have a few questions in my mind at that stage. One is it a good idea to have such a bloody tragedy being performed in this space, which is religious and sacred and serious, and actually where, on the whole, we try to encourage virtues like kindness and peacefulness and mercy and forgiveness and that sort of stuff. And you wanted to bring, that famously difficult play in there, which is very troubling. And I came back to you saying, why don't you try another play? Why not go for a historic play or something? Yes. But anyway, remind me what you said, because it was a very winning argument.
I think we understood, the Scottish play, they don't even say it in theatres. And we were really interested by the idea of bringing this question about justice and evil and murder and all these sort of confusions about who's in the right and who's in the wrong and who's to blame for their actions and who's being sort of puppeteered into a space that is protected and is meant to help people find out and answer those questions about what's good. And I think even the building of the chapel saw multiple kings and that sort of instability in the monarchy. And I think what we see in Macbeth with the murder and, that instability in what's happening in Scotland and the Lords, it's not so much about the murder and the bloodshed. It does really come back to this question of how justice finds its way through instability. And I think rather than dwelling on the idea that, murder and bloodshed is bad, so we should lock it out, we can use those tricky situations to have more opportunities to explore things like justice. It'd be hard to explain good without the concept of evil, right? And I think that's what Macbeth does, is it really brings in a lot of dark concepts to encourage us to, find the light and justify our explanation and understanding of the light. That's what really intrigued us.
That was a bit of a relief to me, because if I got the sense that, no, we want to have people murdered in the chapel, we want to have screaming and people running around with bloody daggers and stuff, that I would have felt would perhaps been inappropriate sensationalizing. But no, I think you saw the more philosophical reasons. And I think one of the big issues, this idea that Macbeth gets an idea planted in his head, which leads him to become ambitious, and in a way that he hadn't been before, and that leads him to become ruthless, which leads to his kind of breakdown because he's gone too far. That
tragic downfall.
Yeah. So what's your sense about what that says about the causality of A, his ambition, and B, his downfall?
I think one of the things that was important to us is we didn't want it to feel like we were being too prescriptive with the answers. So in terms of the role of the witches, we played around a lot with candlelight and having them blow out candles during the production. And we played a lot with shadows and people appearing from different places, because we really kept it very stripped back. We only had a couple of added lighting, and there was no sort of...
It was very simple.
There wasn't really much technical equipment. We were really using the space that we had with the chapel.
That was a tick in my box on the other side.
Yeah, and we wanted to respect what the chapel offers, but we didn't want to lean too much either way in terms of saying the witches are a force of evil who are manipulating Macbeth, and we didn't want to go the complete opposite direction, saying he's using them as an excuse for his behaviour. We wanted to encourage the audience to have to sit with these quite uncomfortable feelings. And I think one of the early things that I talked about, the assistant director Charlie, is that feeling when you're watching like a horror movie and you're anticipating a jump scare, and you've not quite been scared yet, but you've got that real sort of chill. That's kind of the feeling we wanted to create, is that there was this anticipation in the audience. They're kind of like uncertain and a bit jumpy and trying to have to figure out in their own head where they should be sitting on those things.
Yeah, I suppose I was on the edge of my seat with regard to this from the point you first mentioned it to me. But I do remember coming to the performance, sitting right here in the front row, and there are only 2 or 3 rows, so everyone was near the front.
Just for sound. Obviously, it's such a big space. We kept it just 3 rows deep for the sound quality, and so it did create this really intimate feel. That there were moments with the witches sort of chanting that you really felt like they were on top of the audience, and it's quite sort of imposing.
I'd never seen the Macbeth witches portrayed anything like the way they were here. I thought it was great.
Again, I think something we wanted to lean away from was doing it too sort of gruesome and gory and risking that comedic side of it. We really wanted them to be these sinister characters that were quite unnerving. So we had them dressed in basically these floaty white tulle nightgowns, and they really sort of looked quite innocent and young with like loose flowing hair. They were in ballet shoes. So it was this quite sort of gentle, almost like bird-like figure, the way they sort of wafted around. And we did a lot of dance rehearsals with them to make sure that their movement was really kind of not unhuman, but something just a little bit off around it. So the way that they were sort of moving around, there was a difference between them and the other characters.
Yeah, definitely.
So there was a lot of choreography that went into them, and really creating this persona of them that was quite chilling and not quite earthly. And
I really thought that they were tremendous, because they inhabited those roles in a way that didn't allow you to stereotype it, and took you exactly into that space that you were talking about, of actually, no, it's not all down to them, but neither are they irrelevant. Are they actually existing beings, or are they, figments of his imagination? You really don't know. And of course, it's not resolved when you look at the text.
It's not, and we did sort of add our own interpretation onto it. I mean, we cut down the text anyway to make it a 90-minute performance, but we added moments where they would be lingering on the stage, or another character would sort of see them and react to that for a moment, just to really, really confuse, I guess, the audience, but also make them question, well, what does it mean now that Malcolm's seen the witches? Or what does it mean that Lady Macbeth sees them here? Like, how does that question what you're thinking about, whether they're bringing evil or how justice is being fought in the play? So
I came on the first night, and after it, we had a bit of a discussion, or I led a discussion with various members of the cast. I felt that was really, really interesting to get some feedback from the audience in terms of what the issues were raised for them. And also, Macbeth himself had quite a lot to say.
Yeah.
But what did you take from that discussion?
I mean, firstly, I was very nervous. I think it's always an interesting thing. You spend so much time sculpting the team of people to perform, and then we had sold out every night. So coming onto stage with the assistant director and Alfie, who was Macbeth, and suddenly being asked to not justify but explain and talk was a little bit terrifying. But great to have the team around and be speaking with you. And it was really important for us to get across that we had considered why it was appropriate to do it in a space like this. And we didn't want people to feel that it was not a thought through decision, and that we just decided to do it here because it was King's, that we had considered, people will question that this is a sacred space and you've just, murdered someone on stage and dripped blood in this wash basin. And it was great to have the opportunity to talk it through.
And did any of that help you to get more deeply into the why questions? Why did Macbeth go on that journey?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't necessarily for us about providing answers, but really encouraging that deep thought. And we wanted people to come away from the show really thinking about where their vision of justice fits in amongst what is a lot of darkness, and whether they blame Macbeth for these actions or whether they can sympathise with someone that has done so much wrong. And I think encouraging people to have those thoughts about sympathy. So
sympathy or blame, that's the kind of dichotomy you're using it. And in terms of what people said to you personally after the production, whether members of the cast or others, what were you picking up from them?
I think for the cast, so many of them being King's students, it was just a privilege for them and a privilege for myself and the production team to be able to put on a performance in a space that is so central to our community. A lot of them being graduating students or students who haven't really had the opportunity to theatre within King's. It was quite sort of a landmark moment to perform here in front of so many students and fellows and other people from the college. In terms of the audience, I think people were quite chilled by it. It was quite a haunting 90 minutes. There was no...
Oh, chilled in that sense.
There was no... but also it was quite intense. It was 90 minutes. There was no interval. There was no sort of relief from the intensity. There's people coming in. I think we maybe had half a dozen entrances.
Yes.
So people were on edge, especially towards the end. We had the organ screen, the doors shutting quite abruptly.
Yeah.
And it kind of sent this echo into the space. And then this moment of silence that really, I think, had people sitting with their thoughts quite deeply.
So we do that, in this service once a year on Maundy Thursday. That's the day before Good Friday, when it's a kind of a celebration of the first Last Supper. And at the end of that service, we strip everything out of the high altar area, all the things you need for the service and all the decorations and ornaments and so on. It all comes out. And the very last thing that happens is closing of the doors of the Rubens picture. And that coincides with the very end of the psalm, which the choir is singing. And they sing this psalm of lament and sadness. And it slows down. They make it slower and slower and slower as it goes on. And at the very end, great bang as the thing ends. And then we all walk out in silence. Now, you didn't know that, but in a way you ended in a similar way.
Yeah, we had the new king retreating up the walkway there, and then the doors being slammed and the witches sort of drifting off into the distance. And it was this sort of real moment of, has he shut out evil? Is he protected? Is he safe? Or are the witches still going to be able to manipulate? Or is it, how is it susceptible now? So
you're slamming the door closed, but you're opening people's minds at the same time.
Hopefully, yeah.
Should we walk through? But if I really pushed you and said, you and Macbeth, if you were having a chat with Macbeth, where would it start? Would it start with sympathy or would it start with blame?
I think it would start with sympathy. I think what I feel for the characters is how they become a victim to their circumstances and the pressures that they feel and trying to find their way through it. And they end up going down this path that Macbeth very quickly feels that guilt and that realization and doesn't know how to get back from it. And what we see is someone that's regretting the path they're going down and feeling the guilt that they're going down and not able to pull themselves out. And for that, I do feel a lot of sympathy.
So that's quite interesting to me because I know this is a bit of a cliche, But from where I stand in my sort of baby boomer part of life, I tend to think of, Generation Z people as leading a little bit more on judgment than sympathy, and not perhaps being so keen on giving people the benefit of the doubt, or thinking, why are they behaving as they are? Rather, it's a bit of more of a quick, no, that's unacceptable, we can't have it, so censure would follow.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I agree. I think the pace of the news and social media and exposure to the sort of wider scope of the world that we have access to now, that pace encourages this need to judge things quickly and to always be immediately on the right side of things or immediately have an opinion, because it's so fleeting that you need to sort of be on the right side of it, and then the next thing comes up, you need to have the say on that. And
so you think it's driven by the pace of change as much as anything else?
Yeah, I think it's driven by particularly the pace of the internet and how much news is available and how much things we do and say are recorded and referred back to. And I think as a generation we're more exposed, and it puts a pressure on us we feel the pressure to make the right judgment quicker, rather than having the time to mull things out.
Yeah, and once you've made the judgment, what follows, that's also pretty quick as well. Yeah. One of the prayers that I say here at the end of a lot of services combines together the words justice, mercy, truth, and peace. And it's what the prayer is asking God to help us keep all those things in play at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's not only justice, it's justice and mercy. It's not only peace, but it's also truth. It's truth and justice, all those things together. That's a big part of what I believe is a wise approach to moral, ethical, political matters. And in a way, I think you're moving a bit towards that, because I notice, you don't want to leave anything out. You don't want to collapse this down into, here's someone, they've done some bad stuff, or we'll just draw a line under them.
Yeah, and I don't think there's not an escaping from the accountability that the characters need to take for their actions. And we see that remorse and that guilt, and we see that it drives them down this tragic spiral, which ultimately ends in their deaths. But I think it would be too sort of diminishing to just put this blame on them and feel this anger towards them and think that at the end everything is restored and because they're gone everything's fine. I think there are much deeper questions of sympathy for them, and even I suppose there's sympathy for the witches. They're not a natural sort of force in the play, and we have to question whether their understanding of evil and justice is what we understand it to be, and where that makes their role within the show.
Blame, justice, censure, exclusion don't actually help anyone forward very much. It's just like you can inoculate a problem by putting it in a box and casting it away, which is a contradiction of the connectedness of everything.
Yeah, something I've always believed is that to come to a solution, you have to move on from the problem. And if you just would sort of draw Macbeth down to the fact that he committed a murder, you can never come to a solution where you feel satisfied about the restoration of justice within that. You have to be able to move past that one action, I think. Since I joined as a fresher, I got very much involved with the wider Cambridge theatre scene that comes out of the ADC Theatre. So I've produced the pantomime for the last couple of years, which is The Footlights, and multiple other productions.
So what pantos have you done?
So we did Dick Whittington, and then we did Snow White. So they're fully student written, full dozen songs written for the show, and it runs for 2 weeks. So it's quite a big production.
So now I'm asking myself whether I wish you'd come to see me earlier, so we could have had Dick Whittington or Snow White in here.
Panto in the chapel.
Yeah. Maybe not. Let's stay with the serious stuff in here. Although we could laugh as well about things. But you really enjoyed that, I guess.
Yeah, I think I've always really loved that when you're more behind the scenes in a show, you really get to see all departments come together from that conception of the idea until that closing night when you have that complete end to a project. I think it's amazing to see you have the costumes and the lighting and the sound and the music and the people, and it's the way that all those sort of spinning parts come together. Yeah, it's a privilege to be able to do that and have that resource available.
So you must be a student of English literature.
That gave it away. I did 2 years of English literature here at King's, which was amazing. I had so much fun, and it was hard, but the structure of the course here means that you have to study one Shakespeare text in first year, which forms part of your coursework. But other than that, across the 2 years, there's no set texts. So you have the freedom to explore what you're interested in and get this really sort of broad understanding of literature over the past 500 years or so, and really learn as much about yourself and what you're interested in, what you believe in and what you care about as you are learning about the history of literature.
It sounds pretty attractive as a way to
Yeah.
spend your time.
Yeah.
You enjoy doing that?
I mean, I spent 2 years reading really interesting books and learning about really interesting figures in history. And I think one of the reasons I want to study English is because it does draw together sociology and history and, you know, an understanding of people and how the world's worked and operated in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I think some subjects have got sort of interdisciplinarity built into them.
Yeah, I think English has a really great way of bringing in, like you say, like the religious aspect and the educational aspect and what's happening with politics and what's happening with domestic affairs, and especially going back a few hundred years where there was less sort of like storybooks and it was more, you know, the books are the philosophy books and they are, you know, the books about women's education and
Yeah.
yeah.
So what books that you studied particularly stand out for you as you look back?
Particularly stand out. So I did a dissertation in second year,
Okay.
which was the longest I've ever worked with a text. So it
Yeah.
was
What was it based on?
it was Emilia Lanya's Salve Rex Judaeorum, and it was published in 1611, and it's one of the earliest published works by a woman in the UK, or I guess in the world at that point.
Yeah, same year that Macbeth was first performed,
funnily
I
enough.
think. How about
which
that?
we didn't realise
Yes.
I didn't realise until recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, quite a cool coincidence. And it's a collection of poetry that really addresses what it means to have virtue as a woman. And it really explores, it contains a whole sort of list of dedicated poems to women in society at the time. And it really explores these ideas of how women become virtuous and hold virtue and pass it on. And I was exploring this idea that men at the time would sort of inherit the estate and they would inherit the title. And this idea that within a community of women and sort of by association, women were able to attain and pass on these sort of virtuous qualities.
And what counted as virtues at that stage for women?
Sort of the term that is levied against it, that was used at the time by a lot of male authors, is chastity. So there is this idea of virtuous being pure, but more so it was this idea of being kind and being generous and not being angry or bitter, but being a welcoming person. And a lot of it is about hosting and being welcoming to people and a sort of grounded, kind centre that was like, a lot of it is about home. And
Now, a lot of those virtues are quite gendered today, aren't they?
yeah.
So how do you feel about that? I mean, do you think these are virtues and the problem is that they are inappropriately gendered, or do you think there's some problem with them, or are you just really positive about them?
I think they do still have a gendered connotation, the idea of this, like being a hostess and being virtuous. But I think what's important is that at the time, in the 1600s, the way that these women were being written about was in a much more respectful and more uplifting way than male authors were writing about them. And male authors were coming down a much more chaste lens in terms of like the sexual purity of women and preparing to become a wife and a mother. Whereas Lanya's work focuses much more on how women are as a person in society and how they are, you know, to other women and to other men. And it's that idea that the virtue is about their quality in the whole of society rather than a preparation for them to become sort of a wife.
So you're reading her as quite progressive then?
Yeah, I mean, the term I used was proto-feminist. The way she writes is advocating for a better sort of written treatment of women.
And was she influential? I mean, did she have disciples, as it were, and followers?
No, and there is an argument that her work was aiming to like improve her own status in society. But I think it's important to look back on those moments, even though they were maybe smaller at the time, and recognise that like this is, you know, where something has grown from, and it is like, you know, that snowflake that, you know, it does spiral into those bigger snowballs that we obviously see nowadays.
Yeah. So you were putting all that study of literature in the past tense and talking about 2 years. So what's the ongoing story? What's happened since?
So I'm really lucky that Cambridge offer a alternative option for your final year as an undergraduate, where you can transfer into the business school onto a management studies programme. And you can do that from any subject, and it just replaces your last year. So that's what I've been doing for my third year here at King's, which has basically been a crash course into management. So I put down the Renaissance poetry, and instead I've been doing finance and accounting and economics introductions all year, which it's been quite intense. But
I can imagine it was pretty intense, certainly at the time of transition. So how did you feel then? Last October, did you have to deep dive in, or had you been reading accountancy books over the summer or something?
No, over the summer we were sort of left to our own devices, and it really picked up with sort of an induction when we started. But yeah, having spent 2 years reading and writing essays, it was a complete change of brain muscles to go into answering maths questions and having to use a calculator and referencing chapters rather than having to read a full book. And it was a completely different style of learning, and it was really interesting and tiring at the time to realise how even in 2 years I'd become so attuned to one way of understanding knowledge and creating something else, and then I was being asked to just learn and operate in a completely different way.
I would imagine there was a certain amount of fear as you were doing new stuff. Is that
There was
a fair
definitely
word?
moments where I thought, have I made the right decision? Should I have stuck with the English? And it was exhausting. We got to Christmas at the end of Michaelmas term, and I just felt like I couldn't fit anything more in.
Oh, your brain was full.
It was, but it also went so quickly, and I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to broaden my degree out in that way and have that flexibility and gain those sort of more like applicable skills going off into the future.
But on the other hand, I mean, while you were doing all this, you were also with your friends cooking up the idea of doing Macbeth in the chapel. So you must have had a little bit of spare capacity left.
Yeah, definitely like my love of theatre, and that's carried with me throughout my whole time at King's. So.
And which role suits you better, producer or director?
I think producer. I
Really?
think yeah.
Well, just say a bit more about why.
I think seeing the whole process through from that sort of organisational capacity and helping seek sort of the rational solution and problem solve is something that I've always loved. I think for this show particularly, doing it within King's and having sort of that overall say as director, that was amazing, and it was such an incredible experience. And I loved it, and I would definitely direct again. But I think producing for me is more applicable to a lot of shows, whereas to direct something, I was so passionate about it, and I think that would be a harder sort of passion to replicate.
Yeah, I can see that. So that's a particular, complete, holistic effort.
Yeah.
I mean, from my point of view, Eva, you've got huge aptitude for the producer role, and that's one of the reasons why I figured that out fairly early on in our conversations. That's one of the reasons why it happened. But it also plays into the way in which you see your career unfolding as well, I think. Do you want to? Where's it going to go? I mean, you get your results next week?
Yeah, I get my results on Monday.
Graduate on Wednesday.
Yeah,
okay.
So I have 5 days to go.
5 days to go, and then what?
Well, firstly, we're saying a very emotional goodbye to King's.
Yeah.
And goodbye to Cambridge, which is, it's a little much to think about at the moment, but it's going to be an emotional day. And then I'll be heading home for a few weeks to prepare for a move to Prague for a job.
Prague?
Yeah.
And the job?
So I'm going to be, it's a graduate scheme, and I'm going to be working for a brewery called AB InBev, and it's going to be a combination of...
I mean, that's a massive outfit, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the largest brewery in the world, so...
Okay, so very massive.
It's a big company.
You're going to go work for the largest brewery in the world. That's what I'm learning. And with what ambition?
Eventually, the ambition to be making decisions across Europe and even wider in terms of how they operate and how they're operating with respect to sporting events and other sponsorships, and how they are operating sustainably with more pressures on water and farming, and ensuring that their growth comes in a sustainable, ethical way, and that people continue to, drink responsibly and enjoy socialisation and culture and meeting new people.
That's interesting. So you see there are quite a few ethical dimensions to brewing then, both on the consuming end and on the production end. And do you believe the company is alert to that as well? And know that already?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I was interested in all along is, when you are a company that revolves around drinking alcohol, how do you balance the need to drink responsibly?
Yes.
And they are alert to that. And there is a lot of things to do with people are drinking less and drinking of higher quality, and that is one way that's being promoted.
Now, as you can hear, someone's just starting to play the organ down there, which gives us a nice bit of atmosphere in the chapel. But it might mean that it's their turn to have the space rather than ours. But before they completely take over, I want to just say a couple of other things in here. And that is to do with my anxiety about you bringing all the violence into the chapel. Because if we come to the far east end and look at the massive east window, which has got 6 different images in it, we can see that they are all full of violence and death and unjust killing.
Yeah.
And so many of the themes that you're exploring in Macbeth. And if you look on, here's the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is kind of accepting his fate.
Yeah.
And then we come on to the Last Supper, where he's being betrayed. And then all these images of trial, mockery, beating, the images getting denser and denser with more and more people in them. Look at the grotesque faces.
Yeah.
On the far side, the south side, this is the resurrection side, larger images, more women, greater sense of expansiveness and openness to the future. Yeah. But in a way, that's kind of not where we are with Macbeth. We're on this side here. And so, far from me being right to say, I don't want violence and death and murder in the chapel, in some ways I should have said, yeah, we've already got violence, death and murder in the chapel. How can you bring Macbeth in to help us interpret the legacy, the history of this? I mean, what are your thoughts about all this presentation?
We spoke about this, but even the building of the chapel saw multiple kings and that sort of instability in the monarchy. And I think what we see in Macbeth with the murder and, that instability in what's happening in Scotland and the Lords, it's not so much about the murder and the bloodshed. It does really come back to this question of how justice finds its way through instability. And I think rather than dwelling on the idea that, murder and bloodshed is bad, so we should lock it out, we can use those tricky situations to have more opportunities to explore things like justice. It'd be hard to explain good without the concept of evil, right? And I think that's what Macbeth does, is it really brings in a lot of dark concepts to encourage us to, find the light and justify our explanation and understanding of the light. Yeah,
and I love the way in which you, in the production, determinedly kept it open-ended. You were determined that people would go away thinking about it. As we said earlier, you bang the door closed, not to close the issues, but to provoke people to take some responsibility for thinking it forward. I mean, for what it's worth, I feel that one of the big questions we have to reckon with is that we're always living in the aftermath of awful things. The aftermath of evil, the aftermath of violence.
Yeah.
And the one strategy that isn't going to work is trying to do stuff that somehow eradicates that and says
turns a blind eye.
Yeah, turn a blind eye, or we lock that in the past.
Yeah.
Ignoring it, prematurely forgiving it, working out that a certain amount of punishment will deal with it. No, actually, it's the legacy of what's awful that informs our lives and creates the environment in which we somehow or other have to work out our own way. And I think ideally avoid the ways of violence and betrayal and so on, but knowing it will still happen. So I really welcome the opportunity you gave us to think that through again. And it's, in some ways, I'm sure it's transformed your experience of the chapel. In some ways, it's transformed mine as well. It's a very singular, particular thing. And that issue that it raised, what do we do next? I'm hugely grateful that you not only had that idea, but delivered it and were kind enough to have this chat with me now. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the chance on us to let us do that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation with Eva as much as I enjoyed getting to know her and chatting with her on her experiences just on the cusp of her graduation last summer. I felt from the outset in conceiving this podcast series that it would be good to have a student voice in there. It's tremendous, of course, that we've had John Rutter and Simon Jenkins and Gillian Tett speaking from their experience. But there's something very special for me about hearing the way in which Eva was responding to the space and reflecting with us a little bit on how her sense of the chapel and her sense of coming to it had developed over her 3 years in in the college. To see how a person's academic interests can change over their time here in Cambridge, and how she was reflecting on the difference between studying English literature and going on to study management and business and so on, how it really demanded different kinds of skills. I was really struck by how exhausted she felt with the transition from one to the other. There's also an element of a bit of poignancy in that interview as well, because she was just coming to the end of her time as a student here, and she said she's looking forward to the emotional farewell of her graduation day. And it just so happens that this podcast is going live just as I come to the end of my time as Dean of Chapel. And my last service will be in a few days' time, at which point I will lay down responsibility for the life of the chapel, for the administration of it, and for conducting services. It's quite a moment for me, one way or another. But I feel that this podcast series has been a nice way of winding up. It's been so nice for me to see how other people feel about the chapel, and to share a little bit as well my own thoughts about different elements and aspects of the space. I hope you've enjoyed listening. If you've any feedback at all, whether positive or negative, it would be great to hear from you. And do send us an email, chapelpodcast@kings.cam.ac.uk. chapelpodcast@kings.cam.ac.uk. Thank you. Encounters with King's College Chapel was created and presented by me, Stephen Cherry. I co-produced it with Nick Harris.